Chapter 236, Miscalculated Talent. Yoshi and Isamu trained Fujin for 3 continuous days. Fujin absorbed all their teachings and became capable enough to use this jutsu on humans. However, despite his rapid progress, Yoshi and Isamu weren't happy as they weren't able to change Fujin's mind. Fujin thanked them once again before leaving. After exiting the talent, Fujin let out a sigh. He could see reluctance in the eyes of Yoshi and Isamu. He thought, they really wanted me to pursue medical ninjutsu. Unfortunately, that's not the path I want to move on. That said, I understood why they wanted me to pursue this path. It isn't that they think that my talent is good, they probably think that my talent is the greatest due to how quickly I learned the jutsu. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. If it was, perhaps I'd be tempted to take this path at the beginning. Back in the hospital, Isamu let out a sigh and said, "We couldn't change his mind." Yoshi nodded and said, "Yes. But I know someone who can. Come with me." Isamu was surprised. He looked at Yoshi and asked, "Who are you talking about, sensei?" Yoshi smirked and said, "Oh, you know him. He is the best in the world at influencing kids." Isamu was still confused. He couldn't figure out who Yoshi was referring to. However, he didn't ask as it looked like Yoshi wanted to keep him in suspense. He quickly followed Yoshi. After a few minutes, both entered into a room. Isamu's eyes twitched as he muttered, "I should have known." Yoshi smirked and bowed slightly, "Lord Hokage." Hiruzen looked at them and said, "Yoshi, Isamu, how have you two been?" Yoshi replied, "We have been great, Lord Hokage. We have come here because we have a request for you and hope that you can do it. It will provide a huge boost to our medical capabilities." Hiruzen was surprised at his claim. He thought, since Tsunade left, our medical ninjutsu hasn't made much progress. What did these two find? He asked, "What is your request?" Yoshi said, "We met a young kid who has incredible talent at medical ninjutsu. We believe that it may even surpass Tsunade's talent. He managed to learn the mystical palm jutsu with minimal guidance in 2 weeks. Unfortunately, he isn't interested in pursuing medical ninjutsu. Can you convince him to do so?" Hiruzen asked, "Who is the kid?" Yoshi answered, "Suzuki Fujin." Hiruzen went silent for a few seconds as thoughts ran through his mind. He shook his head and said, "No." Yoshi was surprised. He quickly asked, "Why no?" However, Hiruzen interrupted him, "You two are mistaken. He isn't talented in medical ninjutsu." Yoshi and Isamu weren't expecting such a response. Hiruzen corrected himself, "Well, he could be. But mystical palm jutsu won't be a good measure of his talent. Fujin has had excellent chakra control since his academy days. And he has learned the Senju Taijutsu style. So he is accustomed to both yang chakra and excellent chakra control. That is why he learned mystical palm jutsu so quickly." Yoshi and Isamu were dumbfounded by that answer. They looked into each other's eyes. Both were so excited by Fujin's talent and prospects, that they never thought from this angle. Isamu muttered, "Is he related to the Senju clan?" Hiruzen answered, "No. But his sensei was from the Senju clan." Yoshi and Isamu let out a sigh. Yoshi said, "We got excited about nothing." "Sorry for wasting your time, Lord Hokage." Hiruzen replied with a chuckle, "It's fine. It was good to see you after a long time. You can leave." Yoshi and Isamu nodded and left. Hiruzen saw their backs while thinking, though it doesn't show his talent in medical ninjutsu, it definitely shows his talent in yang release. After all, I doubt Renjiro would have spoon-fed him everything. No, he certainly didn't know about it when I trained him. Now that he has learned it, I wonder if he will manage to use yang and yin chakra to modify his jutsus and make them stronger. Hiruzen obviously knew how to use yin and yang chakra to amplify his jutsus. When Fujin arrived to collect the swords, he was surprised to learn that Fujin wanted to learn mystical palm jutsu. Knowing that it would mean that he would have to learn how to use yang chakra, Hiruzen insisted that Fujin learn the jutsu before he was recruited into Umbu. The next day, Fujin once again began using yin and yang chakra to modify his jutsus. However, he was stuck. He analyzed, just like infinite breakthrough jutsu, the air bullet jutsu also showed results quickly. But I haven't been able to modify vacuum bullet and vacuum sphere jutsus at all. I guess the reason is that they have already reached the limits of modification. After all, I could modify the vacuum cannon jutsu. But even that was very little. Since it was based on the vacuum bullet, it too was quite close to perfection. Oh well, I will just focus on my other jutsus. I will start with Wind Sword and Spinning Shield of Wind jutsus and then follow it up with Wind Gale Wolf and Wind Dragon jutsus. Following it, I will work on the rank D and E wind jutsus before working on Earth Wall jutsu and Lightning jutsus. Fujin began training. In the next 4 days, he modified Wind Sword and Spinning Shield of Wind jutsus and began working on the Wind Gale jutsu. However, he decided to take a break and decided to work on another important project. He opened a scroll and withdrew an apple from it. The apple was rotten. Fujin observed it and concluded, "Good. The apple hasn't rotted any further despite it being a week. Time to create a seal with the opposite effect." Fujin created 30 shadow clones one by one and all began thinking about how to reverse the seal. For the next 3 days, they constantly racked their brains thinking about how to reverse the seal. Hundreds of empty scrolls were used up to try their experiments. Finally, one of the clones sighed and said aloud, "This is impossible. We have no leads at all." The other clones didn't reply. After all, they had experienced nothing but failure for 3 days. Considering that Fujin was training with 30 clones, it was equivalent to spending 3 months trying to reverse the seal. However, not a single clone had any breakthrough. Another clone said, "Though we learned this seal, we did it by reverse engineering the seal we already had. There are a lot of symbols that we don't have full information about. It will be better if we try to create the seal after becoming a Fuinjutsu Grandmaster." Fujin agreed with his clone's analysis. One by one, he began dispelling his clones. The tiredness set into his body as he went to sleep. The next day, he had just finished his morning training when an Umbu ninja entered the training ground. Fujin instantly sensed him and waited for him. The Umbu ninja flickered in front of Fujin and instructed, "Come to Lord Hokage's office in 1 hour." Fujin nodded. Having delivered the message, the Umbu ninja flickered away. Fujin saw him leave and thought, finally time to join the Umbu, huh? I kinda wished that Hiruzen took another couple of months. I would have managed to completely modify most of my moves using yin and yang chakra by then. He shook that thought and flickered to his house to freshen up. He thought, oh well. I have heard a lot about how Umbu works and how crucial their role is for the village. Unfortunately, there is not much concrete data on their true activities apart from the fact that they do a lot of dark stuff. A smile appeared on Fujin's face as he entered his house. Whatever, I just hope that it is exciting. I haven't had a good fight for a long time. In an hour, Fujin appeared outside the Hokage's office. Takayo was waiting outside the door. He looked at Fujin and said, "Right on time as always. Go to the basement of the Hokage building." Fujin furrowed his eyebrows and asked, "There is a basement under this building?" Takayo rolled his eyes and said, "Of course there is. The entrance is in the backmost room on the ground floor. Now hurry." Fujin nodded and disappeared from Takayo's sight. Takayo muttered, "I said hurry, not flicker." Fujin appeared in the room Takayo mentioned. An Umbu ninja with an eagle mask was sitting in the room. He looked at Fujin and asked, "Suzuki Fujin?" Fujin nodded. The Umbu ninja made a hand sign. A hole appeared in the room. He said, "You are the last one. Enter." He jumped in the hole and Fujin followed him. After landing, Fujin looked around himself. A look of surprise appeared on his face. Chapter 237, Igniting a Fire. Fujin was surprised due to a few reasons. For one, the basement was much larger than what Fujin expected. It was definitely larger than the base of the Hokage building. It was one large and continuous room with a bunch of rooms lined along the walls. Except that, there wasn't any wall or pillar in the entire basement. Fujin analyzed, the basement is so large. This would mean that it extends beyond just the Hokage building. I guess even the basement of the Konoha hospital is connected. So it could allow an alternate route of travel between the Hokage building and the hospital. Another reason for his surprise was the dense amount of seals he sensed in the basement. He realized, no wonder I never found this basement. The density of the seals here is almost comparable to my house. And they should be stronger as well. And the last reason for being surprised was that he wasn't the only one. He looked at the ones around him and thought, I knew that I wouldn't be the only one. But I expected only a few or at max 20. However, there are more than 200 ninjas here. Looks like Hiruzen wants to increase the strength of the Umbu unit to a whole new level. The eagle-masked Umbu ninja said, "Stay here. Lord Hokage will arrive soon." He flickered away after speaking. Fujin looked around himself. Almost everyone in the room was much older than him. However, his eyes landed on an acquaintance. Teru too noticed Fujin and walked towards Fujin. He waved his hands and said, "I knew you would be selected as well, Fujin." Fujin wasn't overly surprised to see Teru. After all, he had heard a lot about the Umbu from Teru and his strength wasn't weak. Fujin chuckled, "I expected to see you here as well. But I didn't expect to see so many people here." Teru nodded and replied, "Me neither. It looks like Lord Hokage wants to replace the loss of the Uchiha clan by training a huge number of Umbu ninjas." Fujin nodded but couldn't help but think, I doubt training a couple of hundred Umbu will be able to replace the Uchihas. But I guess that this is better than nothing. Fujin asked, "Did you see Hoka here as well?" Fujin didn't want to spread his chakra field here as it might seem insulting to others in the basement. Teru shook his head and said, "No, Hoka is from the branch family of the Hyuga clan. He won't be invited into the Umbu." Fujin was surprised to hear that. But after thinking for a few seconds, he realized that it was very logical. He replied, "I see. That sucks for him." Teru nodded. He was about to speak when both Fujin and Teru looked in a direction. A huge chakra was being released by the eagle-masked Umbu. He announced loudly, Stand properly in lines and hear carefully. Lord Hokage will be speaking a few words. Hiruzen had appeared in the room. He stood at one end of the basement. Soon, everyone gathered in front of him. Hiruzen looked at everyone and thought, good. All 234 accepted the invite. Hiruzen kept looking at everyone without speaking for over a minute. He made eye contact with every ninja in the room. Finally, he began saying in a serious tone, I am glad that all of you have chosen to come here today. And I am sure that you would be surprised to see a large number of ninjas I want to induct into the Umbu. Everyone nodded. Though many had speculations, no one knew for sure. Even the Umbu ninjas weren't entirely sure. Hiruzen continued in a grave voice, in the last month, we experienced one of the darkest chapters in our village's history, the Uchiha massacre. The loss we have suffered is immeasurable, not just in terms of lives, but also in the trust and unity that once bound us. We stand on the precipice of uncertainty, facing external threats that loom over us like dark clouds. Our enemies sense our vulnerability and seek to exploit it. Though I have managed to keep them at arm's length for now, they will still try to provoke us again. Hiruzen stopped speaking and noticed the mood in the basement. Everyone's expression had become grim. Hiruzen began speaking once again. However, this time he heroically said, however, they are gravely mistaken to think of us as weak. We, the shinobi of Konoha, are resilient. We have faced trials and tribulations throughout our history, and yet we have always emerged stronger. It is in our blood, in our very essence, to rise above the challenges that beset us. We possess a fire that burns deep within our hearts, the will of fire. It is the legacy that has been passed down from generation to generation, and now, in this critical moment, it falls upon us to carry it forward. The Uchiha massacre has left a void within our ranks, but it is our duty to fill that void, strengthen our defenses, and ensure that no enemy looks at us with malevolent eyes. In order to fulfill the void, I work day and night to find the most talented Chunins in our village. All of you will be inducted among the Umbu ranks. You will receive proper training to become full-fledged Umbu members. And every single one of you will strive to reach the Umbu captain position. I have no doubts that every single one of you will reach the level of the Jounins. With 234 new Jounins, not a single enemy village will dare look at us with malevolent eyes. You shall become the shield that protects our village, the sword that strikes fear into the hearts of our enemies. I have faith in each and every one of you, in your skills, your dedication, and your unwavering spirit. Together, we shall rise above the shadows that seek to engulf us. We shall write a new chapter in the history of Konoha, one of resilience, growth, and triumph. Remember, my fellow shinobi, that our legacy is not defined by the tragedies we endure, but by how we rise above them. Let us stand tall, shoulder to shoulder, as we face the challenges that lie ahead. May the will of fire burn bright within each of you, guiding us towards a future where our village stands strong and our people thrive. For Konoha, and for the fallen Uchiha, we shall honor their memory through our unwavering resolve. Now, let us embark on this journey together. From today onwards, I welcome you all into the ranks of Konoha's Ansatsu Senjutsu Takushibutai. Hiruzen's words sent goosebumps throughout the crowd. They made everyone's blood boil. Even the hardened Umbu ninjas got excited and more patriotic than ever. Most of the trainees shouted together, "Yes, Lord Hokage." Sweat gathered on Fujin's forehead. He stared at Hiruzen as he thought, holy shit. His speeches keep improving by the day. Even I felt goosebumps. He looked around himself. Everyone was maniacally staring at Hiruzen. A fire burned in their hearts and madness was visible in their eyes. Fujin gulped as he thought, Wow. One single speech might just end up creating 234 jounins in Konoha. Hiruzen's face maintained a serious look. However, he was pleasantly happy with the sight in front of him. He thought, I haven't used this speech since the death of Minato. It's time to have another period of rapid growth. Along with these 234, I will work with the clans to create more ninjas at every rank. Only then can Konoha's army be properly reformed. Hiruzen waited for a few minutes for the excitement to calm down. He wasn't impatient about striking when the iron was hot. After all, he had just lit a fire in the hearts of everyone. He was assured that this fire won't die down anytime soon. Everyone will train hard for some time. Some might train hard for a few months before the fire dies down, while some might train hard for years and go even beyond the Jounin rank. Finally, he said, all of you will be divided into teams. You will be assigned under an Umbu captain. The captain will be responsible for training you for a few months and will also lead you in field missions. He looked at the eagle-masked Umbu standing behind him and said, he is Eagle. He is the commander of all ninjas in the Umbu unit. If you have any issues, you can approach him. He looked back at the crowd and said, he will begin assigning you to Umbu captains. Cooperate with him and begin your training as soon as you can. Konoha needs all of you to step up at this very moment. Hiruzen took a step back and handed the reins to Eagle. Eagle quickly began guiding everyone to their respective Umbu captains. He had already read all the files that Hiruzen sent him and memorized everyone's face, name, and skills. Everyone was called here after he had finished assigning the teams. Chapter 238, Umbu Rules and Training Plans. Eagle was busy informing everyone about their Umbu captain. Soon, he arrived in front of Fujin and Teru. He looked at them and said, good, you are together. Both of you are assigned under Kuma. He pointed towards a bear-masked Umbu and said, that's him, go and introduce yourselves. Fujin and Teru walked to him. Another young Chunin was already standing next to the bear-marked Umbu. The Umbu with the codename Kuma was leaning against the wall. He was a very large person. He was easily over 7 feet in height and had a large physique. In addition, he wore plate armor and had a metal staff next to him. Both Fujin and Teru speculated that he was from the Akimichi clan. The youngster next to Kuma looked at Teru and said with a smile, looks like we are in the same team once again. Teru smiled and looked at Fujin and said, Fujin, he is Hatake Kane. He was in my Genin squad along with Yuri. Kane, he is Suzuki Fujin. He was my classmate. Fujin and Kane said hello to each other. Kuma looked at the three youngsters and said, it's good that you three know each other. Follow me. He opened the room behind him and entered. Fujin, Teru, and Kane followed him in. Kuma closed the door. The room was small and compact with multiple cupboards, lockers, and boxes along the walls. Fujin realized that the room itself had a lot of seals for defense and privacy. He nodded in appreciation, not bad for Umbu headquarters. Looks like the village hire UPS didn't spare any cost while making this basement. Kuma removed his mask and sat down on a bench with a smile on his face. He said, this will be our private quarters. You can use this room to keep spare clothes and weapons. We will also have our team meetings here. Everyone nodded and took their seats. Kuma said, let's start with introductions. I am Akimichi Tsuyoshi. You can call me Captain. I specialize in Akimichi clan secret techniques, fire release, and using a bow to fight. And I prefer frontal assaults during the fighting. What about you guys? Fujin noticed, unlike Renjiro, he isn't interested in knowing hobbies, likes and dislikes. But I suppose that makes sense considering that this is the Umbu. Fujin said, I am Suzuki Fujin. I specialize in wind release and I fight using swords. I am also a sensor and can use the mystical palm jutsu. I prefer to fight from a distance or to fight using hit and run tactics. Tsuyoshi closely observed Fujin. After all, Fujin's fighting method was completely opposite to Tsuyoshi's methods. However, before he could analyze Fujin, his attention was gained by Teru and Kane. Teru followed up, I am Senju Teru. I specialize in water and earth releases and am good with taijutsu. I prefer frontal assaults but can engage in mid-range battles as well. Kane was the last to speak, I am Heitake Kane. I specialize in lightning release and I use a short blade to engage in Heitake Kenjutsu. I can use the mystical palm jutsu as well. I prefer high-speed combat that keeps the enemy on their toes and inflicts multiple small damages to the enemy. My team can use the advantage provided by those small damages to kill the enemy. Tsuyoshi began analyzing, as expected, they aren't bad despite their young age. Fujin and Kane prefer to do high-speed battles to take advantage of their wind and lightning affinities while Teru has the steadiness of the Senju clan. With me as the core, we can form several effective strategies and battle formations. It looks like the chief did a wonderful job once again. My team will cover all 5 natures. In addition, with Fujin's sensor capabilities and his and Kane's healing jutsu, we will have a rather all-round squad for Umbu. He said, good. It looks like you have a good base. I will first tell you about some basic rules of Umbu. The trio paid attention to his words. Tsuyoshi said, for an Umbu, maintaining secrecy is a must. You will never talk about any Umbu mission you do with anyone outside your chain of command. In fact, you shouldn't even be telling anyone that you are selected into the Umbu. To maintain anonymity, you will choose a mask and codename for you. You will always call the other Umbu ninjas by their codenames whenever you are on a mission. And when we meet off duty, you should never call me or any other Umbu ninja using their codenames. As you know, my codename is Kuma. The wooden box behind has a lot of masks. Choose whichever one you want. Also, choose a codename for yourselves. Fujin, Teru, and Kane nodded. They quickly opened up the box and saw a bunch of animal masks in it. The boys took some time to decide on their masks and tried them on to check which size fitted them properly. After a couple of minutes, they walked back in front of Tsuyoshi. Tsuyoshi observed their masks. Teru had taken a turtle mask. Fujin had a hawk mask while Kane had a fox mask. Tsuyoshi asked, have you chosen your codename? The trio nodded. Teru said, my codename will be Turtle. Fujin said, mine will be Hawk. Kane said, mine will be Kitsune. Tsuyoshi nodded and said, good. Now IWI. However, Fujin interrupted him, Captain, since there are so many ninjas in the Umbu, wouldn't multiple Umbu ninjas have the same masks and codenames? Tsuyoshi nodded, yes, they get repeated. I know at least 11 other Umbu ninjas with the Hawk mask and codename. But you don't need to worry as it is a good thing. Our enemies can't recognize us easily from the mask due to how many there are. Also, you don't need to worry about confusion in our ranks. Lord Hokage and our commander have very large memories. They will always recognize you and give you the right task. Fujin nodded and said, all right. Tsuyoshi continued, I will first give you a brief description of my training plan. So listen carefully. Fujin, Teru, and Kane once again paid full attention. Tsuyoshi said, since you have been selected to the Umbu, it shows that you already have good training, discipline, and decent strength. So your training won't involve any jutsus or techniques to make you stronger. Instead, your training will focus on making you act and fight like an Umbu ninja. I will train you in various formations and battle tactics that we will be using in field missions. In addition, I will also teach you all about poisons, including but not limited to detecting poison, which poisons to use against an array of opponents and in various situations, and what to do if you or your ally gets poisoned. Your training will also involve learning various assassination techniques. You will also learn how to provide the perfect security, infiltration, disguise, etiquettes, concealing traces, planting evidence, causing fights, diplomacy, and other such stuff will also be taught. He took a pause and looked at the three youngsters and said in a serious tone, "As a normal ninja, the life of your teammates takes the highest precedence. I am sure that you have saved your teammates or got saved many times during missions. At times, you might have done that at the cost of your mission. But in Umbu, the mission comes above everything else. Failing missions can have grave consequences for our village. And getting captured by an enemy is a strict no. So you will also be trained to resist torture and will also be equipped with multiple means of ending your own life if need be." The faces of the three youngsters grew grim. They all realized that this wouldn't be as easy as their genin and chinin lives. And they realized that the risks to their lives during their time in the Umbu will be the highest. Tsuyoshi looked at them and asked, "Any doubts?" All three replied, "No, Captain." Tsuyoshi smiled and said, "Good. Though we may experience difficult situations, unless there is no choice, we won't abandon our comrades. So no need to be tense. But do train very hard so that we won't ever have to be in a position like that. As an Umbu, you will have access to the training grounds and rooms that are specifically reserved for the Umbu. In the entire village, these facilities are among the very best. So in addition to my training, you can train there to steadily and rapidly build your strength." A smile formed on Fujin's face. He had heard that Umbu training facilities had training rooms similar to the Forest of Death. So they probably had elemental stones. He couldn't wait to get his hands on them. He would take every ryo that Hiruzen won by betting on him back with interest. Tsuyoshi got up and said, "I will take you to your first mission as an Umbu." Chapter 239, The Graduation Exam. The youngsters were surprised to hear that they would take a mission on their first day. After such a long talk, they expected at least a few weeks of training. Teru asked in surprise, "A mission on our first day?" Both Fujin and Kane also had the same question. Tsuyoshi waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. Since you are new here, we will be taking an easy mission. So you will get to do a mission and get used to the Umbu way of operating at the same time." He grabbed his mask and put it on and said, "As I said, outside the room, you will only refer to me by my code name." He walked out of the room. The boys put on their masks and followed him out. At the same time, the Konoha Academy was very busy. It was the day of the graduation exam. 359 students from the final year were taking the exam in various classrooms. Hyaga Hakiro looked at the file and said, "Next, Daisuke Daisuke." Daisuke stood up and walked to the front of the classroom. Hakiro looked at him and said, "Transform into Lord Hokage." Daisuke weaved hand signs and soon transformed into Hiruzen. He looked exactly like Hiruzen with no flaws in appearance. Hakiro nodded in approval. He and a couple more teachers entered his marks in their files. Hakiro said, "Good. Now show me substitution jutsu." Daisuke weaved hand signs and substituted himself with a log of wood placed in the class. He was even better at this jutsu than the transformation jutsu. Hakiro nodded once again and said, "Now create clones." Daisuke waved hand signs and 3 clones appeared next to him. Hakiro was surprised. He said, "Good work. I can tell that you have worked hard in the last few months." Daisuke replied, "Thank you, sensei. It is all because you were such a good teacher." Daisuke didn't have any reluctance or shame in giving him the credit. He was aware that Hakiro would have a major say in his final marks and could influence which squad he would be assigned to and who his sensei will be. Hakiro was pleased by the praise. He said with a smile, "You have passed the exam. Go back to your seat. Next, Anze Bunko." Daisuke returned while Bunko took his place. Just like Daisuke, Bunko too did the 3 jutsu perfectly. Hakiro was surprised once again. He wondered, both Daisuke and Bunko were struggling a lot a few months ago. I was sure that they would fail the exam. How did they suddenly improve so much? He looked at the other 3 orphans in the classroom and wondered, have these 3 improved as well? He called out Iri Ryoma next. Just like the ones before him, he too completed the 3 jutsus. Hakiro praised him as well and called out, "Next, Bazuki Tatsuya." Tatsuya walked up to the front. Like others, he too performed all the 3 jutsus. This time, Hakiro wasn't surprised but he was very curious about how they improved so suddenly. He said, "Good, you have passed the exam as well." Next. However, Tatsuya interrupted him, "Sensei, I have a question." Hakiro looked at him and said, "Ask." Tatsuya asked, "Can I perform other jutsus to improve my score even further?" Hakiro was surprised. He nodded and said, "Sure, go ahead." However, he thought, what is going on? Not only has he mastered the 3 jutsus but even mastered more. A frown formed on his face. I already sent all the talented people from my class to the elite batch. Did I misjudge their talent? No, they definitely weren't this good half a year ago. Tatsuya's question also surprised the kids in the classroom. They didn't expect Tatsuya to learn a new jutsu in addition to learning the 3 required jutsus. After all, most of them had a hard time mastering those 3 basic jutsus. Daisuke, Bunko, and Ryoma especially stared at him. Despite being close friends, they weren't aware that Tatsuya learned another jutsu. Tatsuya waved hand signs and pointed a finger at the log of wood. Fire release, 1 jutsu. A fire ray was released from the tip of his finger and landed on the wood. Soon, smoke appeared from the point of contact and after a few seconds, it caught fire. Hakiro quickly made a move and doused the fire. At the same time, the entire class looked at Tatsuya in awe. Among the 50+ students who took the exam, he was the only one to perform another jutsu. Hakiro patted Tatsuya's shoulder and praised, "Great work, Tatsuya. This will improve your score a lot. Do you have any other jutsu you want to show?" Tatsuya shook his head and said, "I have just learned 1 jutsu so far, sensei. I am also training in fire release, 2 jutsu, but I haven't learned it yet." Hakiro said, "That is a rank D jutsu. You will need some time to learn it. But it's good that you have taken the initiative to learn by yourself. Keep working hard." Tatsuya excitedly said, "Yes, sensei." Tatsuya returned to his seat as everyone stared at him. He felt very pleased with himself. Hakiro called out, "Next, Handa Bunjiro." Bunjiro walked to the front. He was very pumped after seeing Tatsuya's performance. He performed the 3 jutsus and said, "Sensei, I also want to perform another jutsu." Hakiro didn't show his surprise and allowed him. Bunjiro quickly weaved hand signs. Water release, water pellet jutsu. He spat a bullet made of water at the log of the wood. It hit the spot Tatsuya had burned earlier and pierced 8 inches into the log. This time, Hakiro couldn't hide his surprise. He thought, that was a rank D jutsu. Though the piercing power of his jutsu was only because of the damage Tatsuya did to the log, the fact that he could aim it on point is even more amazing. He should have excellent chakra control and aim to do so. Hakiro's gaze towards Bunjiro changed. He praised him a lot before sending him back. He looked at the class and said, "It is already noon. We will take a 30-minute break for lunch." As soon as he and the other teachers exited the room, Tatsuya and Bunjiro were surrounded by their classmates. In a matter of minutes, they had become the most popular kids in the classroom. Only Daisuke, Bunko, and Ryoma were upset and had a look of jealousy on their face. Fujin's analysis regarding the 5 orphans was on point. As he had speculated, there were slackers and hard workers in this group. Daisuke, Bunko, and Ryoma stopped training right after they learned the 3 jutsus and could perform them without failing even once. They spent their time relaxing and playing. On the other hand, Tatsuya and Bunjiro checked their nature affinity and chose jutsus to learn from the library. As a result, they made much higher progress as compared to the other 3. Without the requirement of having to wait for everyone else to finish in order to visit Fujin, the differences became visible immediately. And in the future, these differences would expand further and break their little circle of friends. Daisuke would convince Bunko and Ryoma with his silver tongue, and they would accuse Tatsuya and Bunjiro for training in secret and not hanging out with them. It would result in an argument that would end their 6-year-old friendship. While Tatsuya and Bunjiro were getting all the attention, Hakiro walked with a frown on his mouth as he wondered, how did these 5 improve so suddenly? It's unnatural. And they don't have any family members to guide them either. Though Daisuke praised me, I didn't have anything to do with their progress. He analyzed a lot before having a bad feeling. He thought, don't tell me that they are spies planted by other villages. After all, brainwashing young kids and sending them to other villages as a spy is done quite frequently. Though we do a background check, it isn't foolproof. I need to inform Lord Hokage. He quickly hurried to the Hokage's office. Chapter 240, The Epic Missions of Umbu Black Ops. Hiruzen had just returned to his office after giving the speech. He was about to get back to paperwork when Hakiro knocked on the door. Hakiro entered after receiving permission and greeted Hiruzen politely. Hiruzen asked, "Shouldn't you be conducting the exam? Why are you here?" Hakiro replied, "I gave the students a lunch break. I am here because I noticed something suspicious that didn't make much sense. So I wanted to inform you." Hiruzen asked, "What did you notice?" Hakiro informed him, "My class has 5 orphans who always hang out together. Until a few months ago, I was sure that they would fail. But today, all 5 of them performed all the 3 jutsus perfectly. A couple of them even performed elemental jutsus." A look of surprise appeared on Hiruzen's face. He said, "That's good. I didn't expect that we would have anyone outside the elite classrooms to learn elemental jutsus." Hakiro replied, "Me neither. That is why I am suspicious." However, Hiruzen wasn't worried. He asked, "What are their names?" Hakiro reported their names. Hiruzen nodded. The names were as he expected. He said, "These 5 had approached Suzuki Fujin a few months ago for guidance and were tutored by him. That is probably why they progressed so quickly. You don't need to worry, but feel free to conduct a background check if you want to." Hakiro was surprised. He asked, "Is Fujin the one who graduated a couple of years ago at the top of his class?" Hiruzen nodded and said, "A few of them were in the same orphanage." Hakiro realized. He quickly thanked Hiruzen for providing the info and left. Hiruzen thought, "That boy keeps on giving me surprises. I didn't expect him to be good at teaching as well." Still, from my reports, he spent very little time with them. How did they improve so quickly? Hiruzen wondered for a couple of minutes before stopping. He shook his head and thought, it isn't important how he managed that. The important fact is that he did. From Hakiro's words, those 5 children would have entered the Genin Reserve Force and wouldn't have achieved anything else. But now, since 2 managed to learn elemental jutsus, it's safe to say that those 2 will at least become Chunins. If they work hard or have good luck, they might even become a Jounin. After all, though it might not seem much to learn an elemental jutsu at the age of 12, the fact is that they made the progress in just a few months. If they could maintain that zeal for a few years, it'd be great. Regardless, this is a great achievement for Fujin. Hiruzen was very impressed with what Fujin did. The act of training 5 children in a village that has thousands of ninjas might seem insignificant. But from Hiruzen's point of view, it was very significant. After all, there were hundreds of ninjas in Konoha who could be considered veterans and were far more experienced than Fujin. If these ninjas also guided a few orphans or civilians in the academy and ensured that those kids reached the Chunin rank, Konoha's strength would grow exponentially. Hiruzen thought, initially, we didn't need any such training as all the clans would train their next generation with all their heart. But, after 3 great wars, the strength and numbers of the clan ninjas have severely dropped. Right now, the highest number of ninjas are from civilian families or orphans. It is unlikely that this would change in the future. However, these civilian students don't get the same level of guidance as the clan children. After all, there is no way a teacher can make a difference when teaching so many students who have different levels of talents in every different fight. Suddenly, Hiruzen had an idea. He thought, wait, instead of just hoping that someone guides these kids, how about I start a mentorship program? Hiruzen thought more about his idea and immediately began figuring out the details. In a couple of minutes, he decided, yes, this can be great. I will first make a list of ninjas that can provide good guidance. Then I will assign 5 students to each of them. They won't have to do anything actively. But once a month, they will have to spend a couple of hours with the students. Solve their doubts and provide them with some guidance on how to proceed further and create a decent training plan for them. This way, we will be able to find all the hardworking or talented students that go under the radar. And I can even make some use of the retired ninjas who don't have anything to do. I could even ensure that most of such mentors are civilians or orphans themselves so that they would feel an emotional connection with the students and take them more seriously. Hiruzen saw Hatake Takayo entering the office with a bunch of files. Takayo said, "Lord Hawk." However, Hiruzen interrupted him and instructed, "Keep those files to the side and call Shikaku to meet me at this moment." Takayo was surprised to see how impatient Hiruzen sounded. He immediately placed the files in a corner and left. At the same time, Fujin, Teru, and Kane were hiding in the village while keeping a watch. Every single one of them was pissed off. Half an hour earlier, Tsuyoshi brought Fujin, Teru, and Kane to the streets of Konoha. He looked at them and asked in a serious tone, "Are you aware of where the new Konoha prison is?" The boys nodded. The old prison was close to the Uchiha compound. The new one was built next to the torture and interrogation department. Tsuyoshi said, "Since the Uchiha massacre, the duties of policing the village have also fallen on the Umbu. Your first mission is to hide out of plain sight and keep a watch on the village. If any fight is happening, you should break it off. If a crime is taking place, stop it and arrest the criminal and escort him or her to the prison. If it isn't, then keep hiding. Don't show yourself unless a situation occurs. We will meet back in the same room at 8 p.m. After saying that, he flickered away. Fujin, Teru, and Kane watched with dumbfounded expressions as their captain gave them the most boring of the jobs and ran away. Fujin immediately cursed, "What the fuck?" He looked at Teru and said, "You said Umbu missions are thrilling." Teru was left speechless. Kane sighed and said, "I had heard that all Akimichi clan members are polite, straightforward, and kind-hearted. It looks like it isn't correct." The group was still shocked at how seriously Tsuyoshi had informed them about the mission and ran away before they could react. Teru said in a dejected tone, "I didn't know that Umbu were also given the duty of policing the streets. No wonder Lord Hokage recruited so many new Umbu. It looks like the newbies will be made to police the village until the training is done." Fujin said with a sigh, "I never expected that I'd say that the bandit extermination missions were more interesting." Seeing that Fujin and Teru were dejected, Kane, being the oldest one in the group, took responsibility and said, "All right, that's enough brooding. Though the mission is boring, we should still do it seriously. It would be the worst if we do a bad job and they make us keep doing this mission as a punishment." Teru looked at him and said, "On the contrary, they might permanently put us in charge of policing if we do a very good job." Kane's eyes twitched. He said, "Stop behaving like kids and keep a watch seriously." Fujin looked at him with a deadpan expression and said, "We are watching over civilians. Why are you talking as if two S-rank ninjas are going to clash in the street in the next couple of seconds?" Kane was left speechless. Though he tried to instill seriousness, Fujin was on point. They didn't need to be serious while watching over civilians. At the same moment, all three stared at the street and kept staring for a few seconds. However, nothing happened. Teru sighed and said, "You suck at jinxing, Fujin. Looks like we will have a boring day." Fujin sighed as well, "Yeah. Leave it. Let's take our positions." The trio stopped complaining and took their positions. They kept an eye on the surroundings while staying hidden. None of them was very serious as the job was too easy and boring. Fujin wondered, now, what to do. After thinking for a bit, he made a hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. He used the jutsu thrice and created 3 clones. 2 clones had 10% of his maximum chakra while the third had 40% of his chakra. The clone with the maximum chakra moved to the 23rd training ground. He continued his training of modifying his jutsus with yin and yang chakra and relearning them. Meanwhile, the remaining 2 clones went to the library. Fujin analyzed, the chances of any incident happening is low. Even if it does, the involved parties should be very weak. I will keep 40% of my chakra with me in case of an emergency. As long as nothing happens, my chakra will regenerate throughout the day. Meanwhile, 1 clone will keep modifying my jutsus. And the other 2 clones will begin training in fire manipulation. If we receive the same mission tomorrow as well, then I will begin training in fire manipulation seriously while keeping an eye as well." Fujin let out a chuckle as he realized, I expected to receive some very difficult missions in Umbu. To think that I would get a rank D mission like when I became a genin. And that I would sneakily train an element as I did during the academy days. Life is strange, ha ha ha. Anyways, this is good too. Though it will take a bit longer now, I will still manage to modify all my jutsus in a few months. And I also learn fire release jutsus. That should improve my combination of jutsus with the summons considerably. It'd be best if I can complete all of that before having to go on the deadly missions. Just like Fujin, around 80 other Umbu ninjas were keeping an eye on the village. 90% of them were inducted into the Umbu on that day. Though their excitement was doused as well, the fire lit by Hiruzen still existed in their hearts. Like Fujin, they too began thinking about the ways they could get stronger. In the following period of peace, their strength would grow rapidly. And along with them, Konoha too would close its chapter of weakness and revive its military might.